I never meant to send that message. It was past midnight, and the silence in my apartment pressed down like a heavy blanket. My son, Minjun, finally slept after hours of battling a fever, his small body curled beneath his blanket on the futon. I sat at the edge of the bed, my phone glowing in my hands, tea long gone cold beside me. My chest felt tight, each breath shallow, my thoughts circling the same miserable question. How much longer can I keep doing this alone? The words typed themselves, as though my fingers wanted to confess what my mouth never dared. I can't do this alone. I wish someone was here for me. I stared at the sentence, heart thudding in my throat. It wasn't meant to be sent, just a fleeting whisper of despair. But before I could delete it, my thumb slipped, and the message flew. The contact name glared back at me, Kang Hyunwoo. My pulse stopped. The air rushed out of my lungs. Of all people in my phone, it had to be him. Hyunwoo, my first love, my alpha. The man who abandoned me 6 years ago, leaving me with nothing but broken promises and the secret life growing inside me. I hadn't spoken his name in years, hadn't even dared to think of his voice. Yet here it was, a ghost rising from the ashes of my past. I scrambled to delete it, desperate, but the 2 gray ticks had already turned blue. He'd seen it. No. I pressed my palms against my forehead. Maybe he'd ignore it. Maybe he'd delete it. Maybe he'd pretend it never happened. Then, a knock came at the door. My blood turned cold. At first, I thought I imagined it. But then it came again, firmer, echoing in the stillness of the night. My breath caught in my throat. No one knocked at my door this late. No one ever came to see me. I stood, legs trembling, and crept toward the door. My fingers brushed the handle as dread coiled deep in my stomach. Slowly I opened it, and there he was. Kang Hyunwoo. He stood in the dim hallway light, broad shoulders filling the frame, a tailored coat draped perfectly around his tall frame. His hair was shorter now, neatly styled, and his face seemed sharper, colder, than the boy I once knew. But his eyes, those dark, piercing eyes, held me hostage. "Jaiwon," he said, his voice deep, steady, but carrying something heavy underneath. I froze, hand tightening on the knob. My throat worked, but no sound came out at first. Finally I managed, Why are you here?" He raised his phone, the glow of the screen illuminating the message I had sent. "I can't do this alone. I wish someone was here for me." "You texted me," he said simply. "It was a mistake," I hissed, my voice breaking. "I didn't mean to. You shouldn't have come." His gaze didn't waver. Silence stretched, thick and suffocating, until a small voice shattered it. "Papa!" I turned in horror. Minjun stood at the end of the hallway, rubbing his sleepy eyes, hair tousled from sleep. He blinked at the tall stranger at our door. "Papa, who is that man?" My breath seized in my lungs. I wanted to shield him, to push Hyunwoo away before, but Hyunwoo's gaze had already fallen on him. His eyes widened, for the first time breaking their composure. He took in Minjun's round eyes, the curve of his lips, the shape of his face. Recognition flickered like lightning across his features. "Papa?" he repeated softly, almost to himself. His gaze snapped back to me, sharp and accusing. "He calls you Papa?" My heart pounded painfully. I pulled Minjun closer, placing my hand protectively on his shoulder. "Go back to bed, Minjun. It's nothing." But my son tilted his head, looking at Hyunwoo with innocent curiosity. "Is he your friend, Papa? He looks nice." The words sliced me open. I forced a smile from my boy, though my insides churned. "Go on, sweetheart. Back to sleep." Reluctantly, Minjun shuffled away, though he cast one last glance at Hyunwoo before disappearing into the bedroom. As soon as he was gone, Hyunwoo stepped forward. His voice dropped, low and dangerous. "Jaiwon. That boy, is he mine?" The world tilted beneath me. My lips parted, but nothing came out. Every nerve screamed at me to lie, to protect the life I built. Yet the way he looked at me, like he already knew, made it impossible to breathe. "It doesn't matter," I whispered hoarsely. "Leave. You don't belong here anymore." Hyunwoo's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. "You kept him from me," he said, his tone sharp, wounded. Before I could answer, Minjun's coughing broke through the tense air. The sound was sharp, ragged. My body moved instantly, rushing back to him. He was burning again, his small frame shivering beneath the blanket. Panic surged in my chest. "Not again," I muttered, fumbling for the thermometer. Hyunwoo was beside me in an instant. "What's wrong?" "He's been sick all day. The fever won't go down." My hands trembled as I tried to soothe my son. Without hesitation, Hyunwoo scooped Minjun into his arms. My protests caught in my throat. He held him effortlessly, his large hands steady against Minjun's fragile body. "We're going to the hospital," he said firmly. "Hyunwoo, don't argue." His tone left no room for resistance. "Your son needs help." My chest twisted at the words "your son." I hated how they made me ache. I hated how part of me wanted to trust him again. The night blurred as we rushed to the hospital, my heart in chaos, torn between fear for my child and the storm of emotions crashing down at Hyunwoo's sudden return. When Minjun was admitted, Hyunwoo sat beside me in the waiting room, his coat draped over his lap. The sterile lights reflected off his sharp features, but his eyes were softer now, filled with concern. "You should have told me," he said quietly. My throat tightened. "You left me. You don't get to demand anything now." His jaw worked, but he said nothing for a long moment. Finally, he leaned back, eyes closing briefly. "I never stopped thinking about you." The words made my heart stumble, but I forced myself to look away. I couldn't let myself fall into the same trap again. Not when everything I had was built on surviving without him. Yet when I glanced at him again, his gaze wasn't cold, wasn't arrogant. It was pleading. And in that moment, for the first time in 6 years, I felt the fragile thread of my resolve begin to fray. Hospitals always smelled the same, sterile, cold, a sharp tang of disinfectant that clung to the air. Even after hours of sitting in that waiting room, the scent hadn't dulled. My body ached from exhaustion, yet I couldn't close my eyes. Not when my son lay on the other side of the wall, his fever monitored by strangers in white coats. Beside me, Kang Hyunwoo hadn't moved either. He sat perfectly still, one leg crossed, hands clasped tightly together. From the corner of my eye, I caught how tense his jaw was, how his gaze stayed fixed on the floor like he was wrestling with demons. The silence gnawed at me until I couldn't bear it. "You shouldn't have come," I muttered. My voice was soft, tired, but it carried enough edge to slice through the quiet. He looked up at me then, his eyes dark and unreadable. "If I hadn't, would you have brought him here?" The question hit harder than I expected. My throat tightened. He wasn't wrong. I'd spent the last day convincing myself Minjun's fever wasn't that serious, that it would break on its own. I couldn't afford another hospital bill. I couldn't afford much of anything. "I take care of him," I whispered defensively, more to myself than to him. "I didn't say you didn't," Hyunwoo replied, his tone low, steady. "But you don't have to do it alone." I let out a bitter laugh. "You're the last person who gets to say that to me." Before he could respond, a nurse appeared, her expression kind but brisk. "Mr. Han? Your son is stable. The fever has gone down with treatment. He'll need rest and fluids, but he's out of danger." Relief washed over me, so suddenly my knees weakened. I pressed my hands together, bowing slightly to her. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "Would you like to see him now?" she asked. "Yes." I stood instantly, only to realize Hyunwoo had risen too. My chest tightened. The idea of him being near Minjun, near the truth, unnerved me. Yet when we entered the small room together, my protest died. Minjun lay tucked under a thin blanket, cheeks flushed but breathing easily now. His tiny chest rose and fell in rhythm, lashes fanned against his pale skin. My heart clenched at the sight of him, fragile yet resilient. Without thinking, I reached for his hand. His fingers curled weakly around mine, and I bent down to whisper, "It's okay, Minjun. Papa's here." A presence loomed behind me. I turned slightly to see Hyunwoo standing at the foot of the bed, his expression unreadable as he watched us. There was something raw in his gaze, longing, maybe, or regret. Minjun stirred then, eyes fluttering open. His gaze landed not on me, but on the tall man at the end of his bed. "The stranger came too," he murmured sleepily. Hyunwoo blinked, startled. Then he stepped closer, voice soft, almost hesitant. "Not a stranger. My name is Hyunwoo." Minjun studied him with a child's unfiltered honesty. You look like me. The words pierced me. My breath hitched, and Hyenwoo's eyes flicked to mine. For a moment, time stopped. He didn't say anything, but his silence said enough. I think I like him, Papa, Minjun whispered before his eyelids drooped again. He feels safe. I swallowed hard, struggling to steady my voice. You need to rest, Minjun. Sleep now. As his breathing evened out, the room fell quiet again. I stood frozen, hands still clasping my son's, afraid to face the man beside me. He knows, Hyenwoo said suddenly. I flinched. Knows what? That I'm his father, he answered, his voice steady, calm in a way that terrified me. Maybe not with words. But children, they recognize things we adults try to bury. I shook my head, gripping Minjun's hand tighter. Stop. You don't know anything. Hyenwoo took a slow step closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating from him. His voice lowered, deep and certain. He's mine, Jaiwan. Isn't he? The question hung heavy between us. I couldn't meet his eyes, couldn't let him see how the truth clawed at me. My chest felt tight, my throat raw. I wanted to scream, to push him away, to protect the fragile life I built with trembling hands. But then he whispered, almost to himself, all those years I thought I lost you. I never imagined I lost him too. Something inside me cracked. I turned sharply, glaring at him. You don't get to play the victim. You left me, Hyenwoo. You abandoned me when I needed you most. His jaw clenched, eyes burning. You don't know what I went through. Then tell me, I snapped, voice trembling with years of buried anger. Tell me why you walked away and let me suffer alone. His lips parted, but no words came. He looked away, fists tightening at his sides. The silence was answer enough. I felt my chest hollow out, the hurt as raw as the day he left. Exactly. I turned back to Minjun, stroking his hair, fighting the tears stinging my eyes. But I felt Hyenwoo still behind me, rooted to the spot. Minutes passed. Neither of us spoke. Only the sound of Minjun's breathing filled the room. Finally, Hyenwoo said quietly, I'm not leaving this time. The words sent a shiver down my spine. I didn't dare look at him. You say that now. But words don't erase the past. I'll prove it. His voice was low, steady, carrying a weight I hadn't heard before. I don't care how long it takes. I'll earn back the right to stand by your side, and his. My throat tightened. I hated how my heart stuttered at those words, how my body remembered the warmth of his embrace, the way he used to look at me like I was his entire world. I hated that even now, after everything, part of me wanted to believe him. But I couldn't let him see that. Not yet. You should go, I whispered. Minjun needs rest. For a moment, I thought he'd argue. But instead, he exhaled slowly and stepped back. I'll be back tomorrow, he said simply, as though it was a fact carved in stone. I didn't answer. I couldn't. When the door clicked shut behind him, I buried my face in my son's small hand and let the tears fall silently. For 6 years, I told myself I didn't need him. For 6 years, I built walls to keep the past buried. But now, with one midnight mistake, Kang Hyenwoo was back, and I knew my carefully guarded world was about to crumble. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the hospital room, warm and soft against the sterile white walls. I hadn't slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw him, Hyenwoo, standing in the doorway, his voice promising he wouldn't leave this time. The words replayed endlessly, scratching at the fragile cage I'd built around my heart. Minjun stirred beside me, blinking awake with a small yawn. His fever had broken, thank heavens. He looked up at me with sleepy eyes and whispered, Papa, did the tall man come back? My heart stumbled. What man? The one from last night, he mumbled, sitting up slowly. The one who helped me. He was nice. I forced a smile, brushing the hair from his forehead. Don't worry about him, sweetheart. He's gone now. But the lie burned as soon as it left my lips, because when I turned toward the doorway, there he was. Kang Hyenwoo leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, still in yesterday's coat, as though he hadn't left at all. His eyes met mine, steady and unreadable, but I saw the flicker of satisfaction when Minjun's face lit up. You came back. Minjun beamed, his small voice carrying across the room. Of course I did, Hyunwoo said gently, stepping inside. I promised I would. I stiffened. You shouldn't be here. Hyunwoo ignored me, crouching beside Minjun's bed. How are you feeling, champ? Better, Minjun said proudly. Papa worried a lot, but you helped. Thank you. Something in Hyunwoo's face softened, his usual hard edges melting as he reached out to adjust the blanket around Minjun. That's what I'm here for. I watched the scene unfold, a storm raging in my chest. Minjun had never had a father figure, never even asked about one until recently. Seeing him look at Hyunwoo with such unguarded trust terrified me. When Minjun finally leaned back against his pillow, Hyunwoo straightened and caught my eye. Can we talk? I wanted to say no. I wanted to throw him out and lock the door. But the intensity in his gaze left me cornered. Reluctantly, I nodded and followed him into the hallway. The corridor buzzed faintly with nurses and the distant beep of machines. Hyunwoo stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, familiar, achingly so. You have no right to be here, I hissed, keeping my voice low. You're wrong, he replied calmly. I have every right. He's my son. My stomach twisted. You don't know that. His jaw tightened. Jiwon, I'm not blind. One look at him and I knew. He has my eyes. My smile. Stop. I pressed a trembling hand to my forehead. You don't get to walk back into my life and make claims like that. You weren't there. You didn't choose us. I wanted to. His voice cracked for the first time, raw and unguarded. But my family. I cut him off sharply. Your family? Don't you dare use them as an excuse. When I needed you, you vanished. Do you know what it's like to go through pregnancy alone? To raise a child while everyone whispers that you're a disgrace. The silence that followed was unbearable. His eyes burned with guilt, but I refused to let it soften me. Finally, he said quietly, I regret it every day. Walking away was the worst mistake of my life. And if I could go back, you can't. My voice trembled, but I forced the words out like a blade. It's too late. His gaze held mine, unflinching. Then I'll prove it's not. The certainty in his voice rattled me. I turned away, retreating to Minjun's bedside before my walls collapsed. Hyunwoo didn't leave. He stayed through the discharge process, silent but ever-present, carrying the paperwork, offering his credit card when the nurse handed me the bill. I shoved it back at him. I don't need your money. But when I saw the number printed in red, my stomach dropped. I paid it anyway, forcing a smile from Minjun, though my hands shook as I signed. Outside, the autumn air was crisp, golden leaves fluttering around us as I guided Minjun carefully down the steps. To my irritation, Hyunwoo fell into step beside us. Let me drive you home, he offered. No. Minjun tugged at my sleeve. But, Papa, he has a car. It's faster. I swallowed hard. We'll take the bus. Hyunwoo crouched down to Minjun's height. What do you say, champ? Want a ride in a big, shiny car? My son's eyes sparkled, and I knew I'd lost this battle. The drive was silent, except for Minjun's excited chatter in the back seat. He pointed at everything through the window, the shops, the buses, the stray dogs trotting down the street. Hyunwoo answered his questions patiently, his voice soft in a way I hadn't heard in years. Watching them in the rearview mirror made my chest ache. Minjun's laughter was unrestrained, pure. And Hyunwoo, he looked natural, as if he had always belonged there. The thought unsettled me. When we reached my apartment building, Hyunwoo parked and turned to me. Can I come up? No. But Minjun clapped his hands. Please, Papa. Just for a little while. He helped us. I hesitated, torn between instinct and my son's pleading eyes. Against my better judgment, I sighed. Fine. Just for a little while. Inside, my small apartment suddenly felt even smaller with Hyunwoo in it. He moved carefully as though afraid of breaking something. His gaze lingered on the details, the toys stacked in the corner, the worn blanket draped over the couch, the tiny shoes by the door. Minjun proudly showed him a crayon drawing taped to the fridge. It's me and Papa. Hyunwoo crouched to study it, his expression softening. Then his gaze shifted to the second figure drawn awkwardly beside them. And who's this? That's Papa's friend, Minjun said innocently. I drew him even though he wasn't here. But now you're here, so maybe it's you. I froze. Hyunwoo looked at me, something unreadable in his eyes. He didn't speak, but the silence screamed louder than words. When Minjun finally curled up on the couch and dozed off, I retreated to the kitchen to make tea. Hyunwoo followed, leaning casually against the counter. You've done well, he said quietly. I frowned. What? Raising him. Alone. You're stronger than anyone I've ever known. The compliment sent a rush of warmth through me, unwanted and dangerous. Don't do that. Do what? Say things like that. Pretend you care. His gaze locked with mine. It's not pretending. For a moment, the room shrank to just the two of us, the tension thick enough to choke on. I could feel the heat of him even from a step away, the magnetic pull I had tried so hard to forget. I forced myself to break it, turning back to the kettle. You should go. I'll leave, he said softly. But I'll be back tomorrow. I closed my eyes, gripping the counter until my knuckles whitened. Every word he spoke was dismantling the fortress I had built. And though I wanted to believe it was too late for him, my heart betrayed me with a single thought I couldn't silence. What if it isn't? The days that followed blurred together in a way I hadn't expected. Hyunwoo kept his word. He came every morning, sometimes with breakfast, sometimes with small gifts for Minjun, always with the same calm determination that unsettled me. At first, I thought he'd tire of it, that he would vanish like before, swallowed by his world of polished boardrooms and cold obligations. But he didn't. Each day he returned, weaving himself into the rhythm of our lives as though he had always belonged there. And Minjun adored him. My son laughed more in those few days than he had in months. He clung to Hyunwoo's hand during walks, begged for bedtime stories in his deep, soothing voice, even started drawing new pictures, this time with 3 figures holding hands beneath a yellow sun. It was everything I'd once dreamed of, and everything I feared, because every time I saw them together, my heart cracked a little more. Hyunwoo wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to matter anymore. Yet with every smile, every gentle touch, every word of reassurance, he dismantled the walls I had built stone by stone. One evening, after Minjun had fallen asleep, I found Hyunwoo still lingering in the living room. The lamp cast warm shadows across his face as he sat on the couch, hands resting loosely on his knees. He looked tired, though not in the way a busy man usually does. It was deeper, like someone carrying years of regrets. You should go, I said softly, crossing my arms. It's late. He didn't move. Instead, he looked at me with those dark, steady eyes. We need to talk. A chill ran down my spine. About what? About why I left. I froze. For 6 years, I had carried that wound like a scar etched into my soul. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear his excuses. But his voice was low, raw, and something in me wavered. Against my better judgment, I sank into the armchair across from him. Talk, I whispered. Hyunwoo drew a breath, his gaze dropping to his hands. Back then, I didn't choose to leave. I was forced. My chest tightened. Don't lie to me. I'm not, he said firmly, lifting his eyes to mine. My father found out about us. He said if I didn't cut ties, he would destroy your life. He threatened your job, your safety, even your family. I was 21, scared, stupid. I thought the only way to protect you was to disappear. His words sliced through me. I wanted to reject them, to cling to the anger that had kept me alive all these years. But his voice shook with something I couldn't deny, truth. You could have told me, I said, bitterness lacing every syllable. We could have fought together. His jaw tightened. I thought I was shielding you. But instead, I left you alone. And when I came back, you were gone. Silence stretched between us, heavy with all the years we lost. I stared at him, searching for cracks, for lies, but all I saw was regret. You don't understand, I whispered, my voice breaking. The nights I cried myself to sleep. The fear of raising a child without anyone. The shame, the loneliness. I hated you for it. I told myself you were heartless. His expression twisted, pain flickering across his features. And maybe I was. But I never stopped loving you, Jiwon. Not once. The words hung in the air, dangerous and intoxicating. My heart thudded violently, traitorous in its response. I looked away, clutching the armrest. Don't say that. You don't get to say that anymore. Why not? He asked quietly. Because I can't afford to believe you, I whispered. If I do, and you leave again, it will destroy me. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Hyunwoo stood, stepping closer until he was right before me. His shadow fell over me, his presence overwhelming. He leaned down, close enough that I could feel his breath against my skin. Then I'll prove it, he murmured. I'll stay. No matter how long it takes, no matter how hard you push me away, I'll stay. My chest heaved, my heart screaming at me to push him back, to tell him to leave. But I didn't. I couldn't. His nearness stirred something I'd buried so deep, I thought it was gone forever. Before I could respond, a small voice cut through the tension. Papa! We both turned. Minjun stood in the doorway, clutching his stuffed rabbit, eyes half closed with sleep. He blinked at us, confused. Why are you crying? He asked softly. I touched my cheek, startled to find it wet with tears. I forced a shaky smile. It's nothing, sweetheart. Go back to bed. Hyunwoo knelt in front of him, his large hand brushing Minjun's hair gently. Don't worry, champ. I'll take care of him. Minjun's lips curved into a small smile before he shuffled back to his room. The moment he was gone, the silence pressed in again. I stood abruptly, needing space. You should go, I said, my voice barely steady. This time, Hyunwoo obeyed. But before he stepped out the door, he turned back, his eyes holding mine. You don't have to forgive me today. Or tomorrow. But don't shut me out forever, Jaiwon. Not when we still have a chance. When the door closed behind him, I sank onto the couch, my entire body trembling. For 6 years, I had lived in shadows, convinced the past was buried. But now, the past sat across from me every day, smiling at my son, whispering promises I swore I wouldn't believe. And despite everything, my heart whispered a truth I didn't want to hear. I still loved him.